My brother sold my worthless paintings for $60 each, not knowing they're worth $15 million or who was really buying them. The message from my older brother Dennis buzzed through while I was hunched over my easel in my cramped Chicago studio apartment, working on what he would have called another useless doodle. Morning sunlight filtered through my single window, casting shadows across canvases that covered every inch of wall space, paintings my family had written off as expensive hobbies from their starving artist sister. Sold your amateur paintings for $60 each. Your welcome smirking face, Dennis had texted, followed by a shrugging emoji. Found them in Dad's basement when we were cleaning out his stuff after the move. At least now they're not cluttering up the place. I stared at my phone screen, my coffee mug growing cold in my trembling hands. Those paintings, 5 pieces I'd stored at Dad's house during my experimental phase 4 years ago, weren't just random artwork. They were early pieces from my Crimson Dawn series, created under my carefully guarded pseudonym N. Rivers. Each canvas represented months of painstaking work, layered concepts, and techniques I'd spent years perfecting. Thanks for letting me know, I typed back, keeping my response carefully neutral. His reply came instantly, wait, aren't you mad? I thought you'd be upset about me getting rid of your stuff without asking first. I wasn't mad. I was fascinated. Because those amateur paintings were worth approximately $15 million each on the current international art market. And the buyers? Well, they were actually my own art representatives working under strict instructions to acquire any N. Rivers pieces that surfaced on the secondary market. My phone rang immediately. Dennis, probably expecting me to have a meltdown about my lost artwork. Hey Natalie, he said, using that particular tone of forced sympathy he reserved for delivering what he thought was devastating news. Look, I know you're probably upset about the paintings, but honestly, $60 each was pretty generous for amateur work. The guy running the estate sale said most people were only offering $30. Estate sale. The words hit me like a physical blow. What estate sale? I asked, genuinely curious about how this disaster had unfolded. You know how Dad had all that junk packed away in his basement after the divorce, Dennis explained. Mom and I decided to just clear everything out before he moves to the retirement community. There were boxes of your old art supplies, some stretched canvases, and those 5 paintings you abandoned there. I figured they were just taking up valuable space, and Dad needed the cash from the sale anyway. Dad needed the cash. That was rich. My father, William Morrison, had been coasting on his successful dental practice for the past 20 years, constantly lecturing the family about his financial wisdom and business expertise. He'd spent years trying to convince me that art was an impractical career choice, suggesting I pursue something stable like nursing or teaching. Who bought them? I asked, already knowing the answer but needing to hear it. Some art dealer from downtown, Dennis replied. Really professional guy, actually. Said he specialized in emerging contemporary artists and thought the paintings showed promise. His words, not mine. He even left his business card in case you wanted to connect with him about future work. I almost laughed out loud. The art dealer was undoubtedly Cameron Mitchell from Mitchell & Associates, one of the most prestigious galleries in North America. Cameron had been representing my work under the N. Rivers pseudonym for the past 5 years, helping me build an international reputation in the contemporary art world while I maintained my cover as the family's struggling artist. That was thoughtful of him, I managed to say. Yeah, and Natalie, don't take this the wrong way, but maybe this is a sign that you should consider a more realistic career path, Dennis continued. I mean, if a professional art dealer thinks $60 is fair market value for your work, maybe it's time to face facts about your prospects in the art world. Dennis had always been the golden child, the successful one with the MBA from Northwestern, the management position at a respected marketing firm in Lincoln Park, the suburban house in Naperville with the 3-car garage. He'd married his college sweetheart Amanda, and they'd produced 2 perfectly average children who attended private school and played travel soccer. He'd also been slowly drowning in debt for the past 2 years, though he'd never admit it to the family. His marketing firm had lost several major clients, his mortgage was underwater, and Amanda's shopping habits had pushed their credit card debt well into 6 figures. But Dennis maintained his facade of success, just like the rest of my family. I appreciate the advice, I said, meaning it more than he could possibly understand. Also, Dad wanted me to ask if you need help with rent this month, Dennis added. I know things have been tight, and we don't want you to get evicted or anything. The concern in his voice was genuine, which made it both touching and infuriating. They looked at my modest Lincoln Park apartment, my second-hand furniture, my simple lifestyle, and assumed I was barely surviving. They had no idea that my struggling artist persona was carefully maintained to protect something much larger. "I should be fine," I said. "But thank you for caring." After ending the call, I walked to my laptop and pulled up the secure portal that connected me to my real life, the one my family knew nothing about. River's latest exhibition at the Meridian Gallery had sold out within 2 hours of opening, with individual pieces selling for between $12 and $18 million. The art world had been buzzing about the mysterious artist who refused all interviews and public appearances, creating a mystique that only drove prices higher. My phone buzzed with a text from Cameron: acquired 5 early Crimson Dawn pieces from estate sale. Family had no awareness of value. All 5 now secured in climate-controlled storage. Shall we discuss authentication and potential exhibition inclusion? I smiled and typed back: family thinks they sold them for $60 each to help with basement cleanup. Let's keep it that way for now. Cameron's response was immediate: understood. Your secret remains safe. These pieces could anchor the major retrospective we've been discussing. The retrospective. Cameron had been pushing me to consider a career-defining exhibition that would cement River's place in contemporary art history. We were talking about a show that could push individual piece values above $25 million. But a retrospective would require more media attention, more scrutiny, and potentially more risk of my identity being discovered. My family's ignorance had become my greatest protection. They dismissed my work so completely that they never bothered researching contemporary art trends, never noticed that River's pieces bore striking similarities to the amateur doodles I created in my spare time, never connected the dots between my artistic techniques and the work that was revolutionizing galleries across 3 continents. The next morning, I decided to visit Dad at his new place. He lived in a modern senior living community in Oak Brook, surrounded by the comfortable amenities of upper-middle-class retirement, golf course views, a clubhouse with restaurant dining, scheduled activities that kept residents engaged and social. "Natalie, sweetheart," Dad said, opening his apartment door with the forced enthusiasm he reserved for visits from his troubled youngest daughter. "Dennis said he talked to you about the basement clean-out. I hope you're not upset about those paintings." "Not at all," I said, settling into his new leather recliner. "I understand you needed the space." Good. Dennis was worried you might be hurt that we didn't ask permission first. "But honestly, Natalie, those paintings were just collecting dust, and $60 each was more than I expected given." He trailed off, probably realizing that finishing the sentence would require him to articulate exactly what he thought of my artistic abilities. "Given that they were amateur work," I supplied helpfully. Dad had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "Well, I just meant that the art market is incredibly competitive. Even talented artists struggle to make a living. I've always worried about your financial future." "I understand," I said. "And I appreciate that you and Dennis were looking out for me. Actually, that's something I wanted to discuss. This basement clean-out made me realize how uncertain my situation might appear to you. Dennis and I have been talking, and we think it might be time for you to consider a career change." Here it came, the intervention I'd been expecting for years. "I've spoken to some contacts who run businesses in the area," Dad continued, pulling out a folder filled with printouts. "There are opportunities in healthcare administration, customer service, even entry-level accounting if you're willing to learn. You're still young enough to start fresh in a practical field." He'd clearly spent considerable time preparing this presentation: job listings, career transition guides, articles about adults successfully changing professions. I looked at the opportunities spread across his coffee table: healthcare administrator, $45,000 annually. Customer service supervisor, $38,000 with benefits. Junior accountant, $42,000 to start. My last painting had sold for $16.8 million. "These look like solid opportunities," I said, genuinely appreciating the effort he'd invested in researching options. "Can I think it over?" "Of course, but Natalie, don't wait too long. The longer you stay trapped in this artistic fantasy, the harder it becomes to transition to the real world." The real world. If only he knew that I was currently negotiating with 4 different museums for permanent installations, that my work was being studied in graduate-level art theory courses at Yale and Harvard, that collectors from 15 countries had pieces on waiting lists. After leaving Dad's community, I drove to my real studio, not the cramped apartment where I maintained my cover, but a 6,000 square foot warehouse space in the West Loop. The building looked unremarkable from the outside, just another converted factory among dozens of similar structures. But inside, it was a cathedral of creativity. Natural light flooded through massive skylights, illuminating canvases that stretched 15 feet in height. Professional-grade easels held works in progress, each piece representing months of conceptual development and technical execution. The air smelled of oil paint and unlimited possibility. This was where Rivers truly existed. I pulled out my phone and called Cameron. "I've been thinking about your retrospective proposal," I said, running my hand along the edge of a canvas that would likely sell for $25 million when completed. "My family just sold 5 of my early pieces for $60 each. They have absolutely no idea what they're actually worth. If I do this retrospective, if Rivers steps into the full spotlight, there's a real chance they'll eventually make the connection." Cameron was quiet for a moment. "Are you concerned about their reaction?" "I'm concerned about losing the protection that their ignorance provides. Right now, they're so convinced of my failure that they don't examine anything I do closely. That invisibility has been invaluable. But it's also limiting your growth as an artist and your impact on the contemporary art world," Cameron said. Rivers' work deserves to be seen, studied, and celebrated on the largest possible stage. You're not just creating beautiful objects, you're advancing important conversations about identity, society, and the human experience. He was right. My work under the Rivers pseudonym had tackled subjects that mattered: economic inequality, environmental destruction, the psychology of modern isolation, the masks we wear to survive family expectations. The paintings weren't just aesthetically successful, they were culturally significant. What if we structured the retrospective to maintain the mystery? I suggested. No artist appearances, no interviews, just the work itself. We could even emphasize the anonymous aspect, make it part of the artistic statement. A phantom retrospective, Cameron mused. Actually, that could be even more powerful. The absence of the artist becomes part of the commentary on celebrity culture and artistic commodification. We talked for another hour, developing a concept that would allow Rivers to have the career-defining exhibition while keeping Natalie Morrison safely invisible. It was a delicate balance, but one that could work if executed carefully. That evening, Dennis called again. "Hey Natalie. Amanda and I have been talking, and we want you to know that if you need help transitioning to a new career, we're here for you. We could even help with a loan for professional training or certification programs." The offer was genuinely kind, which made it simultaneously heartwarming and heartbreaking. Dennis was offering to go further into debt to help his struggling sister, not knowing that his financial situation was far more precarious than mine. "That's incredibly generous," I said. "But Dennis, are you sure you're in a position to help right now? I know things have been challenging in the marketing industry." There was a long pause. "What do you mean?" "I just meant that the economy has been tough on everyone. I wouldn't want you to overextend yourself trying to help me." "Natalie, I'm doing fine. The business is solid. Amanda and I are comfortable, and we can afford to help family when needed. That's what successful people do, we look out for those who are struggling." His defensiveness told me everything I needed to know about how close to the edge he really was. Dennis had built his identity around being the successful sibling, the one who'd made smart choices and achieved financial stability. Admitting problems would require dismantling that entire self-concept. "I appreciate that," I said, "but I think I'm going to be okay." "Natalie, listen to me. I know you don't want to give up on your dreams, but at some point, you have to face reality. You're 31 years old. You're living in a tiny apartment. You're barely making ends meet. And now you've lost 5 paintings that represented months of work. This pattern can't continue indefinitely." 31 years old. In the art world, I was practically a prodigy. Most artists didn't achieve significant commercial success until their 40s or 50s, if ever. Rivers had broken into the highest levels of the international market by age 29, a feat that art critics called unprecedented and revolutionary. "You're right that patterns can't continue indefinitely," I said. 4 weeks later, the Meridian Gallery announced the upcoming Rivers retrospective, Hidden Truths, 6 Years of Vision. The art world exploded with excitement. Collectors, critics, and museums began competing for access to the exhibition and the rare opportunity to acquire pieces from the mysterious artist's complete catalogue. The announcement made international headlines. Art publications ran extensive features speculating about River's identity, influences, and future plans. The mystique around the anonymous artist had reached fever pitch, with some critics comparing the cultural phenomenon to Banksy's anonymous street art movement, but with far higher financial stakes. My family remained completely oblivious. Dad called the day after the announcement to update me on potential job opportunities. Dennis texted about a customer service position at his friend's company. Amanda sent me links to online certification programs for healthcare administration. They were so focused on fixing my failed life that they never looked beyond their assumptions to see what was actually happening around them. The retrospective opened on a Thursday evening in November. I stood across Michigan Avenue from the Meridian Gallery, wearing jeans and a simple sweater, watching as art collectors, museum directors, and cultural influencers arrived in expensive cars and designer outfits. These were people who could afford to spend millions on a single painting, gathering to celebrate work I'd created in my warehouse studio, while my family worried about my ability to pay rent. Cameron had been texting me throughout the day with updates. Opening night sold 4 pieces within first 2 hours. Museum acquisition offers coming in for major works. Critics calling it the most important contemporary exhibition in a decade. My phone rang. It was Dennis. Natalie, where are you? I tried calling earlier. Just out running errands, I said, which was technically true. I was running the errand of watching my career-defining exhibition open to unprecedented international acclaim. Good. Listen, I have some news that might cheer you up. Remember that art dealer who bought your paintings from Dad's basement cleanout? He called Dad today. My heart skipped. Really? Yeah. Apparently, he's been doing some research, and he thinks your work might have more potential than he initially realized. He wants to meet with you about representing some of your newer pieces. Cameron was playing his role perfectly. We discussed this approach, a gradual introduction that would allow me to start sharing more of my success with my family without revealing the full extent of the River's empire. He mentioned that the contemporary art market is really hot right now, Dennis continued, and that artists with your particular style are finding new audiences. He thinks you could maybe sell pieces for a few thousand each if you develop the right relationships. A few thousand. The painting that had just sold at the opening was purchased by the Museum of Fine Arts Boston for $22.3 million. That sounds promising, I said. It is, Natalie. This could be the break you've been waiting for. If you could make even $3,000 per painting and complete maybe one painting every 2 months, that's $18,000 a year in extra income. Combined with a regular job, you could actually achieve some financial stability. $18,000 a year. River's work had generated over $300 million in sales during the past 5 years. I'll definitely follow up with him, I said. You should. And Natalie, I'm proud of you for being open to new possibilities. I know it's hard to let go of unrealistic dreams, but sometimes scaling back our expectations is the first step toward real success. After ending the call, I walked into the gallery. The space was packed with people examining my work, discussing the technical mastery, the conceptual depth, the cultural significance. I moved through the crowd anonymously, listening to conversations about the mysterious Rivers and their revolutionary impact on contemporary art. Near the back of the gallery, I found the 5 paintings that Dennis had sold for $60 each. They were displayed with special lighting and detailed placards explaining their significance in River's artistic development. A small crowd had gathered around them, with one collector explaining to his friends how these early works showed the seeds of the artistic vision that had revolutionized contemporary painting. These 5 pieces alone are valued at approximately $75 million, the collector was saying. They represent a crucial transitional period in River's evolution as an artist. $75 million. Dennis thought he'd helped me by getting $60 each for them at an estate sale. 6 months later, I made a decision that would change everything. I was standing in my warehouse studio, looking at a new series of paintings that Cameron believed could be my most important work yet. The pieces explored themes of identity, family, and the masks we wear to protect ourselves from those who claim to love us. They were deeply personal, informed by years of hiding my success from the people who mattered most to me. I picked up my phone and called Cameron. "I want to do something different with these new pieces," I said. "What did you have in mind?" "I want to sign them with my real name, Natalie Morrison." There was a long pause. "Are you sure?" That would essentially reveal N. River's identity to anyone who's been paying attention to your family situation. "I think it's time," I said. "My family loves me, but they've never really seen me. Maybe it's time to give them the chance. This could change everything. Your privacy, your family relationships, your entire life structure." "I know," I said, "but I'm tired of being invisible to the people who matter most." The new exhibition opened 3 months later at the Art Institute of Chicago. The announcement that N. Rivers and Natalie Morrison were the same person sent shockwaves through the art world and made international headlines. The mysterious artist who had revolutionized contemporary painting was revealed to be a young woman whose family had been selling her work at estate sales. The story became a cultural phenomenon. Articles about hidden genius, family dynamics, and the nature of artistic recognition filled major publications worldwide. My phone rang constantly with interview requests from major media outlets. But the call I was waiting for came on a Tuesday afternoon. "Natalie," it was Dennis, his voice confused and shaken. "I just saw the news. Is this real?" "It's real," I said. "But how? When? I don't understand." "Those paintings I sold for $60 were worth about $15 million each," I said gently. The buyers were my art representatives working under instructions to acquire any of my pieces that appeared on the secondary market. The silence stretched for nearly 2 minutes. "Natalie, I need to see you. We all need to see you. Can you come over to Dad's place?" An hour later, I was sitting in Dad's comfortable apartment, but everything felt different. Dad and Dennis looked at me like they were seeing a stranger, which in many ways they were. "I don't know how to process this," Dad said finally. "All these years we thought you were struggling, that you needed our help and guidance, but you were one of the most successful artists in the world." "I was protecting something I'd built," I said. "Your assumptions about my failure became my camouflage." Dennis was staring at his hands. "I sold $75 million worth of art for $300 total. The art representatives were acting on my instructions," I said gently. "I wanted to make sure those pieces were recovered safely." "But why didn't you tell us?" Dad asked. "Why let us worry about you, offer you money we couldn't afford, try to convince you to give up on your dreams?" "Because you never asked what I was actually doing," I said. "You saw what you expected to see, the struggling youngest child who needed guidance and protection." We talked for hours that day, unraveling years of misunderstanding and rebuilding our relationships on a foundation of truth. It was painful and healing and necessary. Dad looked at me with a mixture of pride and regret. "I spent so many years trying to protect you from disappointment in the art world. I never imagined you'd already conquered it." "You were protecting the daughter you thought you knew," I said. "Now you have the chance to know the daughter who actually exists." 6 months later, my family attended the opening of my latest exhibition, this time as proud relatives rather than concerned interventionists. Dad wore a new suit he'd bought specifically for the occasion, and Dennis had spent weeks reading art magazines to prepare for conversations with collectors and critics. As we stood together in the gallery, surrounded by paintings that had been created in secret and revealed in truth, Dad put his arm around my shoulders. "I'm sorry it took us so long to really see you," he said. "You're seeing me now," I replied. "That's what matters." My family had spent years telling me what my work was worth, $60 per painting at best. They'd never bothered to discover what I'd actually built. Now they knew the difference between assumptions and reality. And so did I.